My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and my husband beat me every day for 3 years. One day, when I passed out from the pain, he took me to the hospital, pretending I had fallen down the stairs. But he froze when the doctor walked in, because that doctor was my brother, Michael, who I hadn't seen in 5 years. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and comment below where you're watching from. Your support means everything. I need you to understand something before I go any further. When I say he beat me every day, I mean every single day, not once a week, not just when he was drunk or stressed, every single day, for 3 years. 3 years of waking up wondering which version of him I'd get that morning. 3 years of covering bruises with makeup. 3 years of lying to everyone I loved. 3 years of dying a little bit more inside each time his fist connected with my body. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, back when I still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. I met David when I was 27 years old. God, I was so young, so naive, so stupid. I thought I knew what love was. I thought I knew what I wanted. I had just gotten a promotion at the marketing firm where I worked. I was living in a nice apartment downtown. My life was finally coming together. And then he walked into that coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, and I swear to you, it was like something out of a romance novel. He was tall, handsome, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He had this smile that could light up a room, these warm brown eyes that seemed to see right into your soul. He was an architect, successful, drove a luxury car, owned a beautiful home in the suburbs. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. When he called me that same evening, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Our first date was magical. He took me to this expensive restaurant I'd only dreamed of going to, pulled out my chair, ordered wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, listened intently to everything I said. He asked about my dreams, my family, my goals. He seemed genuinely interested in who I was as a person. He made me feel seen, heard, valued. At the end of the night, he kissed me softly on the cheek and told me I was the most incredible woman he'd ever met. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Flowers delivered to my office. Surprise weekend getaways, romantic dinners under the stars. He was attentive, generous, thoughtful. He remembered every little thing I told him. My favorite flower? Peonies. They showed up on my doorstep every Friday. My favorite dessert? Tiramisu. He learned to make it from scratch just for me. I mentioned once that I'd always wanted to see the Northern Lights. 3 weeks later, we were on a plane to Iceland. My family adored him. My mother said he was the most charming man she'd ever met. My father, who was usually skeptical of anyone I dated, actually gave him his blessing before David even proposed. My friends were jealous. They'd say things like, "Where did you find him?" And "Why can't I meet someone like that?" I felt like I'd won the lottery. My brother Michael was the only one who seemed hesitant. He just started his medical residency abroad, specializing in emergency medicine. Before he left, he pulled me aside at a family dinner and said, "Sarah, I don't know what it is, but something about him feels off. Just be careful, okay?" I laughed it off. I thought Michael was just being overprotective, the way big brothers are. I wish to God I had listened to him. David proposed after 8 months of dating. We were at the beach, watching the sunset, and he got down on one knee with a ring that must have cost 3 months' salary. Of course I said yes. Of course I cried tears of joy. Of course I called everyone I knew to share the good news. We were married 4 months later in a beautiful ceremony with 200 guests. My wedding dress cost more than my first car. The reception was at an exclusive country club. Everything was perfect, picture perfect, terrifyingly perfect. The first sign came on our honeymoon. We were in Bali, staying at a luxury resort, and I was taking photos by the pool. A young man, maybe a hotel employee, offered to take a photo of both of us together. I handed him my phone, and David put his arm around my waist. When we got the phone back, David's entire demeanor changed. We went back to our room, and he grabbed my arm, hard, his fingers digging into my flesh. "You were flirting with him," he hissed. I was shocked. "What? No, I wasn't. He was just being nice." David's grip tightened. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I saw the way you smiled at him." That night, I had my first bruise. 5 finger-shaped marks on my upper arm. David apologized profusely the next morning. He brought me breakfast in bed, bought me an expensive bracelet, told me he was just stressed from the wedding, that he loved me so much he sometimes got crazy thinking about losing me. He cried. He begged for forgiveness. And I, like a fool, gave it to him. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that the stress of the wedding and the new marriage had gotten to him, that he'd never do it again. But he did. Again and again and again. 6 months into our marriage, the mask came completely off. David started controlling everything. He wanted to know where I was at all times. He installed tracking apps on my phone. He insisted I quit my job because my wife doesn't need to work. At first, I thought it was romantic, that he wanted to take care of me, but it was never about taking care of me. It was about controlling me. He controlled the finances. Every penny went through him. I had to ask permission to buy groceries, to get my hair done, to buy a coffee. He monitored the credit card statements obsessively. If I spent $5 he didn't approve of, there was hell to pay. He controlled my friendships. Every time I wanted to see my friends, he'd pick a fight. Why do you need them when you have me? Are you trying to get away from me? What are you planning that you don't want me to know about? Eventually, it was easier to just stop seeing them. One by one, my friendships faded. They stopped calling. They stopped inviting me to things. I was completely isolated. He controlled my family contact too. Phone calls with my parents had to happen when he was in the room. Video chats were monitored. If I seemed too happy talking to them, he'd accuse me of complaining about him, of making him look bad. My parents lived 3 hours away, and what used to be monthly visits became twice a year, then once a year. Michael was abroad, so our communication was already limited to emails and occasional video calls, but even those became impossible. David would sabotage them, pick fights right before scheduled calls, or hover so close that I couldn't speak freely. And then there was the violence. God, the violence. It started with grabbing, squeezing, restraining. Then it escalated to pushing and shoving, then slapping, then punching, then kicking, then things I don't even have words for. He'd hit me for anything. Dinner wasn't ready on time. Hit. The house wasn't clean enough. Hit. I wore an outfit he didn't approve of. Hit. I looked at another man in public. Hit. I didn't respond to his text within 5 minutes. Hit. Sometimes he didn't even need a reason. He'd come home from work in a bad mood, and I'd become his punching bag. I learned to read his moods, to anticipate his anger, to make myself small and invisible. I walked on eggshells every single day. I perfected the art of diffusing situations, of apologizing for things that weren't my fault, of taking the blame for his problems. But it was never enough. Nothing I did was ever enough. The worst part? He was still charming to everyone else. In public, he was the perfect husband. Attentive, loving, generous. He'd put his arm around me, kiss my forehead, brag about how lucky he was to have me. Our neighbors thought we were the ideal couple. When we ran into his colleagues or friends, he'd be all smiles and compliments. No one suspected a thing. And if they noticed my long sleeves in summer, or my sunglasses indoors, or the way I flinched when he touched me unexpectedly, they never said anything. I became an expert at hiding bruises. Makeup became my best friend. I learned which foundations had the best coverage, which color correctors worked on which types of bruises. I wore long sleeves even in 100-degree weather. I made excuses for every injury. I'm so clumsy I walked into a door. I fell down the stairs. I slipped in the shower. I bruise easily, always have. But the bruises on my body were nothing compared to the bruises on my soul. He didn't just break my bones. He broke my spirit. He told me I was worthless, ugly, stupid, unlovable. Lucky that he put up with me. He said no one else would ever want me, that my family didn't really care about me, that my friends had all moved on and forgotten about me, that I was nothing without him. And after a while, I started to believe it. When you hear something enough times, it becomes your truth. I stopped looking in mirrors because I hated what I saw. I stopped dreaming about the future because I couldn't imagine one. I stopped fighting back because what was the point? I was trapped, financially dependent, socially isolated, emotionally destroyed, physically broken. I thought about leaving. God, I thought about it every day. But where would I go? I had no money, no job, no friends who remembered me, family who lived hours away and didn't know what was happening. He'd taken everything from me, and part of me, the part he'd successfully brainwashed, believed I deserved this, that I'd done something to cause it, that if I just tried harder, loved him better, was more perfect, maybe he'd stop. The night everything changed started like so many others. David came home from work angry. Some project had fallen through, some client had complained, some colleague had gotten credit for his idea. I don't even remember the specifics anymore. All I remember is the rage in his eyes when he walked through the door. I had dinner ready, pot roast, his favorite, with roasted vegetables and homemade rolls. The house was spotless. I'd cleaned all day. I'd put on the dress he liked, done my hair the way he preferred. I thought I'd done everything right. But it didn't matter. It never mattered. He started yelling about something. I couldn't even follow his logic anymore. One minute he was angry about work. The next he was screaming about how I'd embarrassed him at a dinner party 3 months ago. Then he was raging about how I'd looked at the mailman that morning. His anger didn't need logic. It didn't need reasons. It just needed a target. And I was always the target. Then he lunged at me. I tried to run, tried to get away, but I'd learned long ago that running only made it worse. He grabbed me by the hair, slammed me against the kitchen counter. I felt my ribs crack. The pain was blinding. He punched me in the face, once, twice, 3 times. I tasted blood. He shoved me backward and I fell, my head hitting the corner of the kitchen island, and then everything went black. When I came to, I was in David's car. My head was pounding. My vision was blurry. Every breath sent sharp pains through my chest. David was driving frantically, muttering to himself. When he noticed I was conscious, he looked at me with wild eyes. "You're going to tell them you fell down the stairs. Do you understand me? You tripped. You fell down the stairs. That's the story. You say anything else, and I swear to God, Sarah, you'll regret it." I was too weak to argue, too dizzy to think, too scared to do anything but nod. He pulled up to the emergency room, came around to my side, helped me out of the car with exaggerated gentleness. To anyone watching, he looked like the concerned husband rushing his injured wife to get help. But I could feel his fingers digging into my arm, a silent warning. We walked into the ER, and he immediately started performing. "Please, we need help. My wife fell down the stairs. She hit her head. She was unconscious. Please, someone help us." Nurses rushed over with a wheelchair. They asked me what happened. I opened my mouth, and David answered for me. "She's always rushing around the house. I keep telling her to slow down. She tripped at the top of the stairs and tumbled all the way down. I found her at the bottom, unconscious." They wheeled me into an examination room. David hovered, holding my hand, stroking my hair, playing his role perfectly. A nurse began taking my vitals, asking questions. I gave mechanical answers, the same lies I'd told 100 times before. Yes, I fell down the stairs. No, I don't remember what happened. Yes, I've been clumsy lately. No, this hasn't happened before, even though my medical records from 3 different hospitals told a different story. Then the door opened. Good evening. I'm Dr. Morgan. I'll be your attending physician today. I looked up and my heart stopped. Standing in the doorway, in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck, was my brother Michael. 5 years. 5 years since I'd seen him in person. He'd finished his residency abroad and had recently accepted a position back in the States, but I didn't know where. We'd barely communicated in the past 2 years, thanks to David's interference. And now here he was, staring at me with those same protective big brother eyes I remembered from childhood. The recognition was instant and mutual. I saw his professional mask falter for just a second as his eyes swept over my battered face, my hunched posture, my fearful expression. Then his gaze moved to David, and I watched my brother's jaw tighten. Mr. Michael's voice was cold, professional. Anderson. David Anderson. I'm her husband. David's voice had changed. The concerned husband act was slipping. He'd gone pale, clearly not expecting this complication. I need to examine my patient privately. Please step outside. Michael's tone left no room for argument. I prefer to stay with my wife. She's disoriented. She needs me. David's grip on my hand tightened painfully. Hospital policy. All examinations are conducted privately unless the patient specifically requests otherwise. Michael looked at me. Mrs. Anderson, would you like your husband to remain during the examination? I saw the warning in David's eyes, but I also saw the anger in Michael's, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw a way out. No, I whispered. He can wait outside. David's face went rigid. He leaned down, kissed my forehead for Michael's benefit, but I heard him whisper, remember what I said. Then he left, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like a death knell. The moment we were alone, I broke. 3 years of held-back tears came flooding out. I sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe. Michael immediately came to my side, carefully, avoiding my injuries, but I could see his hands shaking. Sarah, his voice cracked. Sarah, how long? How long has this been happening? I couldn't speak. I just cried harder. Michael took a deep breath, visibly struggling to maintain his professional composure. I'm going to examine you now, okay? I need to document your injuries. I need to see everything. I know it's hard, but I need you to trust me. He was thorough, painfully, carefully thorough. Every bruise, every cut, every injury was photographed and documented. When he asked me to remove my shirt, I hesitated, but his eyes were kind, gentle, filled with a rage that wasn't directed at me. So I did. I heard his sharp intake of breath. My torso was a canvas of bruises in various stages of healing. Purple, green, yellow, brown. Old injuries overlapping with new ones. He examined my ribs. 3 were broken, 2 more were fractured. When he touched them gently to assess the damage, I whimpered. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. He documented burn marks on my arms, handprint-shaped bruises around my neck, scars from previous injuries that had healed badly, a fracture in my left wrist that had never been properly set. He examined my head, the place where I'd hit the kitchen island. Concussion definitely, possibly worse. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He called in a female nurse, explained that he needed to perform a complete examination. I understood what he meant. The shame I felt in that moment was overwhelming. But Michael held my hand and told me I was brave, told me I was strong, told me he was going to make sure David never touched me again. The examination revealed what I'd been too broken to admit even to myself. There were signs of sexual assault, trauma that indicated ongoing sexual violence. I hadn't even let myself think of it in those terms. He was my husband. Husbands couldn't rape their wives, right? That's what David had told me. That's what I'd made myself believe. But Michael explained, in his gentle doctor voice, that consent didn't stop mattering just because you were married. That what David had been doing to me wasn't love or passion or even rough sex. It was rape. It was violence. It was a crime. When the examination was finally over, Michael helped me sit up, handed me a hospital gown to cover myself. Then he pulled up a chair, sat down in front of me, and took my hands carefully in his. Sarah, I'm not just your brother right now. I'm a mandated reporter. I'm legally required to report suspected domestic violence. And this, he gestured at the tablet where all the photos were documented. This is the most severe case I've seen in my entire career. I'm calling the police, and I'm going to make sure David Anderson never touches you again. I wanted to protest. The fear was so ingrained in me. You don't understand, Michael. He'll kill me. If he finds out I told anyone, he'll kill me. He's not going to get the chance. Michael's voice was steel. Because he's not getting near you ever again. I promise you that. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. Sarah, I've been back in the country for 3 months. I've been trying to reach you. I called, I texted, I emailed, nothing. I drove to your house 2 months ago. David answered the door, told me you'd left him, that you'd moved to California with another man, that you never wanted to speak to our family again. I knew he was lying. I knew something was wrong, so I hired a private investigator. He pulled out his tablet, opened a file, and showed me. Photos of David, documents, records, and my world shattered all over again. Sarah, David's real name is David Morrison. He changed it legally 7 years ago. Before you, he was married to a woman named Rebecca Morrison. She died 5 years ago. The official cause of death was accidental fall down the stairs. I felt like I was going to vomit. Down the stairs, I whispered. Yes, the same story he was using tonight. Rebecca's family insisted it wasn't an accident. They said David had been abusing her, but there wasn't enough evidence to press charges. David collected $500,000 in life insurance money from her death. Michael swiped to another document. 6 months ago, David took out a $750,000 life insurance policy on you, Sarah. You're worth more to him dead than alive. The room spun. He wasn't just abusing me. He was planning to murder me, just like he'd murdered Rebecca. That's why the beatings had gotten worse. That's why he'd been so reckless lately, leaving injuries that were harder to hide. He was building up to the final act, the fatal accident that would set him up financially for years. I was going to die, I said numbly. He was going to kill me. Yes, Michael said quietly. I believe he was, but he's not going to get that chance, because we're going to stop him. 2 police officers entered the room within minutes. Detective Martinez and Officer Chen, specialists in domestic violence cases. They'd seen cases like mine before, they said. They believed me. They wanted to help. But here's the thing about domestic violence cases. They're hard to prosecute. Even with evidence, even with medical records, even with photographs, abusers walk free all the time. Especially rich, charming abusers with expensive lawyers and no prior arrests. David had never been charged with anything. Rebecca's case was officially closed as an accident. There were no other formal complaints against him. Detective Martinez explained it to me gently. If they arrested David right now, he'd make bail within hours. He'd come after me, or he'd flee. Either way, I wouldn't be safe. and they might never be able to build a solid case against him. But if I was willing to help them, if I was willing to be brave one more time, they could get him, really get him. Not just on assault charges that might result in a few months in jail, but on attempted murder. Maybe even on Rebecca's murder if we could find enough evidence. They wanted me to wear a wire, to go home with David and get him to confess, to get him to talk about what he'd done, what he'd planned to do, to get everything on tape. Every part of me wanted to say no. The idea of going back to that house, of being alone with him again, of deliberately provoking him to talk about his crimes, it was terrifying. But then I thought about Rebecca, about how she died alone, scared, with no one believing her family when they said it was murder. I thought about all the other women David might hurt if he wasn't stopped, and I thought about the fact that if I didn't do this, he would kill me eventually anyway. So I agreed. Michael gave me a necklace with a hidden camera. The police gave me a recording device disguised as part of my phone case. They set up surveillance around our house. Unmarked cars on the street, officers positioned within running distance. They assured me that the moment I gave a distress signal, they'd be through the door in seconds. Michael didn't want to let me go. I could see it in his eyes, but he gave me his personal cell phone number, made me promise to call him the moment I was safe. He hugged me carefully, mindful of my injuries, and whispered, "You're the strongest person I know. You've got this." Then he had to put his professional mask back on. David had been pacing in the waiting room for over 2 hours, demanding to see me, threatening to call lawyers and report the hospital for keeping him from his wife. Michael walked out there, and I heard him say coldly, "Your wife has a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, extensive bruising, and possible internal bleeding. She needs rest, pain management, and careful monitoring. I've given her prescriptions and instructions. She's cleared to go home, but she needs to follow up with her primary care physician in 3 days." "Of course, doctor. I'll take excellent care of her." David's voice was smooth as silk. Michael's response was ice cold. "See that you do, because if she comes back here with any additional injuries, I will personally ensure that every authority becomes involved. Do I make myself clear?" There was a tense silence. Then David said, "Perfectly clear." The drive home was silent. David didn't say a word, but I could feel the rage radiating off him. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. When we pulled into the garage, he sat there for a moment, engine off, just breathing heavily. "Your brother," he finally said. "Of all the fucking doctors in all the fucking hospitals in this city, we get your brother. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stayed quiet. The recording device was active. I needed to let him talk. 3 years I've put up with you. 3 years of your inadequacy, your weakness, your pathetic excuses. 3 years of having to look at your worthless face every day. And now your brother shows up and ruins everything. "I didn't know he was back," I said softly. "I swear I didn't know." "Shut up!" He slammed his hand against the dashboard. "Just shut up! You've ruined everything. Do you know how much planning this took? Do you know how careful I had to be?" "Planning what?" I asked, even though I knew. I needed him to say it. We went inside. David immediately poured himself a drink, downed it, poured another. He paced back and forth in the kitchen, the same kitchen where he'd beaten me unconscious just hours earlier. I stood there, trying to stay calm, trying to remember that the police were listening, that help was just minutes away. 3 years, David muttered. 3 years with you, and you couldn't even die right. You were supposed to die tonight. You hit your head hard enough, I made sure of it. But no, you woke up in the car. You ruined it. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice steady. Die? He laughed bitterly. You really are stupid, aren't you? You think I married you because I loved you? You think any of this was real? He gestured around the house. This is business, Sarah. It's always been business. You had a decent job, Good credit, no major debts. You were perfect. Trusting, naive, easy to isolate, easy to control. I don't understand, I said, even though I understood perfectly now. The life insurance policy, you idiot. $750,000. More than enough to set me up comfortably while I moved on to the next one. Just like Rebecca. Just like Sarah before her. Oh, you didn't know about that one, did you? She's buried in a state park upstate. Her family thinks she ran off with a boyfriend. I felt bile rise in my throat. 3 women. At least 3 women. How many more? But you had to make it difficult, David continued, his voice rising. You had to survive tonight. You had to end up with your brother as your doctor. Now everything's complicated. Now I'm going to have to be more creative. Creative how? I pushed, needing him to keep talking. I should finish it right now, he said, moving toward me. I should push you down those stairs for real this time. Tell your brother you fell again. Oops, the concussion made you dizzy. Tragic accident. Who could have predicted it? He grabbed my arm, started pulling me toward the staircase. This was it. This was the moment I gave the signal. But before I could, David suddenly froze. He looked around, paranoid. Wait, why are you asking so many questions? You never ask questions. His eyes narrowed. He grabbed my necklace, the one Michael had given me. He examined it closely, and I saw the moment he realized what it was. His face contorted with rage. You bitch! You're recording this! He ripped the necklace off me, threw it against the wall. Then he grabbed my phone, saw the case, threw that too. You set me up! You and your brother set me up! Police! Get on the ground! Now! The front door exploded inward. Officers poured in from every direction. David tried to run, but he was tackled before he made it 3 steps. Detective Martinez read him his rights, while Officer Chen helped me to a chair, asked if I was okay, told me I was safe now. David was screaming. She entrapped me. This is entrapment. I want my lawyer. You can't do this. But they could, and they did. Detective Martinez smiled grimly as she handcuffed him. David Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree assault, second-degree assault, domestic violence, and we'll be adding murder charges for Rebecca Morrison and Sarah Chen once we exhume the bodies. Wait, Sarah Chen? There was another one before Rebecca? Over the next few days, the full scope of David's crimes came to light. He was a serial killer, not the stereotypical kind you see in movies, but a killer nonetheless. A predator who targeted vulnerable women, married them, insured them, and killed them for profit. Sarah Chen had been his college girlfriend. She died in a hiking accident 12 years ago. David was the last person to see her alive. He collected $200,000 from a small life insurance policy her parents had taken out on her. Rebecca Morrison came 6 years later. The staircase accident, $500,000. And then me, Sarah Anderson, the next payday, $750,000. But it didn't stop there. Detective Martinez kept digging. They found an ex-fiancé from 10 years ago who had survived a car accident that killed her sister. David had been driving. The sister had a life insurance policy naming David as the beneficiary. They'd added him to the policy shortly before the accident. He'd collected $350,000. Another girlfriend from 15 years ago had fallen from a balcony during a party at David's college apartment. She survived, but had amnesia. She couldn't remember what happened. David had moved on quickly after that, but now, with prompting from police, she was starting to remember things. Arguments, violence, him pushing her. The police eventually connected David to 5 confirmed murders and 3 attempted murders spanning 15 years. And those were just the ones they could prove. There might have been more. David's mother was brought in for questioning. She broke down and confessed that she'd known. She'd known since David was a teenager that there was something wrong with him. violence toward animals, toward other children, toward girlfriends. She'd covered it up, made excuses, paid people off, moved them to new towns when things got too suspicious. She'd created a monster and then helped him hunt. The trial was a media sensation. The handsome architect who murdered women for insurance money. The charming monster. The real-life Bluebeard. The press had a field day. Rebecca's parents testified. They'd known David killed their daughter, but without evidence, they'd been powerless. They broke down on the stand, thanking me for giving their daughter justice. Sarah Chen's parents testified. They'd suspected something was wrong, but David had convinced them their daughter's death was a tragic accident. They'd lived with guilt and doubt for 12 years. The woman who'd fallen from the balcony testified. She'd remembered everything. David had tried to kill her because she'd discovered he was cheating on her with multiple women and had threatened to tell his parents, who were funding his college tuition. The sister of the car accident victim testified. She'd always suspected David had caused the crash deliberately, but no one believed her. And I testified. I told the jury everything. Every beating, every rape, every threat, every manipulation. I showed them the photographs of my injuries. I played the recording of David confessing to multiple murders. I looked David directly in the eyes and told him he'd failed. He hadn't broken me. He hadn't killed me. And he would never hurt anyone ever again. The defense tried to claim I'd entrapped him, that the recording was inadmissible, that David was the real victim here. They painted him as a misunderstood man driven to anger by his wife's inadequacy. They tried to put me on trial instead of him, but the jury saw through it. The evidence was overwhelming. The pattern was undeniable. The recording was clear. And the medical evidence showed years of systematic abuse. It took them 3 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder for Rebecca Morrison. First-degree murder for Sarah Chen. Attempted murder for me. Multiple counts of assault and battery. Conspiracy to commit murder. Fraud. And a dozen other charges I can't even remember. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd spent 30 years on the bench. She'd seen everything, but even she seemed shaken as she reviewed the case. She looked at David and said, "In my 30 years as a judge, I have never encountered a defendant as calculating, as predatory, and as remorseless as you. You didn't kill in passion or rage. You killed for profit. You systematically targeted, manipulated, abused, and murdered vulnerable women who had the misfortune of trusting you. You viewed them not as human beings, but as financial transactions. You are a predator in the truest sense of the word, and you deserve no mercy." She sentenced him to consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He would die in prison. There was no chance of appeal, no chance of early release, no chance of ever seeing freedom again. He was 39 years old. He would spend the next 40 or 50 years in a cell, and then he would die there. As the bailiffs took him away, David turned and looked at me one last time. He smiled. Even then, even facing the rest of his life in prison, he smiled at me like he'd won something. But he hadn't won. I had survived. And that smile had no power over me anymore. The aftermath of the trial was complicated. David's mother was charged as an accessory after the fact for covering up his crimes. She received a 15-year sentence. She died of a heart attack 3 years into her sentence. The life insurance companies sued David's estate for fraud. Every penny he'd collected from his victims was returned to their families, plus damages. Rebecca's family reached out to me. We met for coffee, and Rebecca's mother held my hands and cried. She told me I'd given them closure, given them justice, given them the ability to finally grieve properly. She gave me Rebecca's wedding ring, a simple gold band, and said, "Rebecca would want you to have this. You gave her justice. You gave her a voice. She's at peace now because of you." Sarah Chen's family reached out too. They'd established a scholarship in Sarah's name, and they asked if I wanted to be involved. I said yes. It felt right, honoring these women who'd lost their lives to the same monster I barely escaped. But even with the victory, even with justice served, I was broken. PTSD hit me hard. I had nightmares every night. I couldn't sleep in the dark. I couldn't let anyone touch me. Loud noises made me flinch. I had panic attacks in grocery stores. I couldn't watch TV shows or movies with violence. I jumped at shadows. I started therapy immediately. Twice a week at first, then 3 times a week when the nightmares got worse. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Williams, yes, another Sarah, like me, like Sarah Chen, like all of David's victims seemed to be, specialized in trauma. She was patient, kind, and she never pushed me faster than I was ready to go. She explained to me that what I was experiencing was normal, that my brain had been living in survival mode for 3 years, and now that the threat was gone, it was trying to process all the trauma it had suppressed just to keep me alive. She told me healing wasn't linear, that some days would be better than others, that setbacks didn't mean failure. Michael moved back to town permanently. He took a position at the same hospital where he treated me that night, and he made it his mission to be there for me. He came to my apartment every day for the first 3 months. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just sat together in silence. Sometimes I cried and he held me. Sometimes I screamed and raged and threw things. And he just cleaned up after me and told me it was okay to be angry. He blamed himself. He kept saying, if he'd just stayed in touch better, if he'd come home sooner, if he'd pushed harder when David claimed I'd left for California, maybe he could have saved me sooner. Maybe he could have saved Rebecca. Maybe he could have saved Sarah Chen. I had to tell him over and over that it wasn't his fault, that David was a master manipulator, that he'd systematically cut me off from everyone who loved me, that Michael had done everything he could have done, that he'd saved my life by being in that emergency room at exactly the right moment, that if it had been any other doctor, I'd probably be dead by now. The first year after the trial was the hardest. I had to learn how to be a person again. I had to relearn things I'd forgotten, like what I enjoyed eating, what music I liked, what made me laugh. David had controlled every aspect of my life for so long that I didn't know who I was without him. I had to learn how to manage money because I'd been financially dependent on David. I had to learn how to make decisions without fear of punishment. I had to learn that it was okay to say no, to have boundaries, to take up space in the world. I reconnected with old friends, the ones I'd pushed away during my marriage. Some of them came back into my life easily, understanding that I'd been in an abusive situation and hadn't been able to maintain contact. Others were hurt, feeling abandoned, and we had to rebuild trust slowly. A few friendships couldn't be salvaged. That hurt, but I understood. I disappeared on them for 3 years. They'd moved on with their lives. My parents were devastated when they learned the truth. They blamed themselves for not seeing the signs, for not pushing harder when I became distant, for liking David so much that they'd ignored their own daughter's withdrawal. My mother cried for days. My father, who'd given David his blessing to marry me, looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. I had to reassure them too. Had to tell them that David had fooled everyone, that abuse victims become experts at hiding the truth, that it wasn't their fault. Family therapy helped. We all had to heal together. 6 months after the trial, I did something that terrified me. I started a support group for domestic violence survivors. Just me and 3 other women in a church basement, meeting once a week. We shared our stories. We cried together. We supported each other through the bad days. We celebrated the victories, no matter how small. One woman, Maria, had escaped her abuser just weeks before our first meeting. She was living in a shelter, had 2 young children, was trying to find a job while dealing with PTSD and physical injuries. Watching her struggle reminded me so much of what I'd been through. Another woman, Jennifer, had left her abusive husband 5 years earlier, but was still dealing with the trauma. She taught me that healing wasn't about reaching some finish line where you were suddenly fixed. It was about learning to carry your past without letting it crush you. The third woman, Keisha, had survived abuse from her boyfriend in college 10 years ago. She'd gone on to become a therapist specializing in trauma. She was our inspiration, proof that we could not just survive but thrive. That group became my lifeline. It grew from 4 women to 10, then 20, then 50. We had to move to a bigger space. We started offering resources, legal aid, financial planning, job placement assistance, childcare during meetings. Michael volunteered as our medical consultant, offering free examinations and documentation for women building cases against their abusers. A year after the trial, I did something I never thought I'd be ready for. I started dating again. His name was James, and I met him at a charity fundraiser for domestic violence awareness. He'd lost his sister to domestic violence 3 years earlier. Her boyfriend had killed her in a murder-suicide. James understood trauma in a way most people didn't. Our first date was coffee in a busy cafe in the middle of the day. I told him up front about my past, about David, about my PTSD. I expected him to run. Instead, he thanked me for trusting him with my story and asked what he could do to make me feel safe. We took things slowly, painfully slowly. Our second date was 3 weeks after the first. It took 2 months before he held my hand, 3 months before our first kiss, 6 months before I could let him come to my apartment, 8 months before I could be intimate with him without having a panic attack. James was patient. He never pushed. He respected every boundary. He asked permission before touching me. He learned my triggers and helped me avoid them. When I had nightmares, he held me, if I wanted to be held, or gave me space if that's what I needed. He came to therapy with me so he could understand how to support me better. It wasn't always easy. I had bad days where I couldn't stand to be touched, where I looked at him and saw David, where my PTSD convinced me that any man who claimed to love me was really just waiting for the right moment to hurt me. There were times I pushed him away. Times I sabotaged our relationship because I was terrified of being vulnerable again. But James stayed. He proved, day after day, that not all men were monsters, that love didn't have to hurt, that I deserved kindness and respect and partnership. 2 years after the trial, James proposed. We were at the Foundation's annual gala, surrounded by survivors and supporters, and he got down on one knee in front of everyone. He said, "Sarah, you are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I've ever known. You've turned your pain into purpose. You've saved lives by sharing your story. You've built something beautiful from the ashes of something horrible. I would be honored to spend the rest of my life supporting you, loving you, and learning from you. Will you marry me?" I said yes, but I also made him go to couples therapy with me before the wedding. I needed to make sure we had the tools to build a healthy marriage, to communicate effectively, to handle conflict without it turning toxic. James agreed immediately. We got married in a small ceremony 2 years ago. Michael walked me down the aisle. Rebecca's parents were there. Sarah Chen's parents were there. The women from my support group were there. It was a celebration not just of James and me, but of survival, of healing, of hope. Rebecca's mother gave a toast that made everyone cry. She said, "Rebecca would have loved Sarah. They would have been friends, I think." They were both strong women who deserved so much better than what David Morrison gave them. But Sarah did what Rebecca couldn't. She survived. She fought back. She got justice. And now she's helping other women do the same. Rebecca's legacy lives on through Sarah's work. And I know my daughter is at peace knowing that her death wasn't in vain. James and I have been married for 2 years now. We have a son, Jacob, who just turned 1. And I'm pregnant with our second child, a daughter we're naming Rebecca Sarah, honoring both women who died so that I could live. Motherhood has brought up new trauma. I'm terrified of failing my children the way I feel like I failed myself by staying with David for so long. I'm scared of them ever experiencing violence or abuse. I'm hypervigilant about their safety in ways that sometimes border on unhealthy. But therapy helps. James helps. And slowly, I'm learning that I can protect my children without letting fear control me. The foundation I started has grown beyond anything I imagined. We now help over 500 survivors annually. We provide legal assistance, financial support, housing assistance, job training, childcare, therapy, medical care, everything a survivor needs to rebuild their life. We have a 24-hour hotline. We have a network of safe houses. We have partnerships with law enforcement, hospitals, and legal aid organizations. Michael serves on our board of directors. He's become a leading advocate for mandatory reporting and better training for medical professionals to identify abuse. He gives lectures at medical schools. He's published research papers on identifying patterns of abuse in medical records. He's saved countless lives by teaching other doctors what to look for. David's mother's estate was liquidated after her death. Her lawyer contacted me to say she'd left everything to the foundation in her will. It was her way of trying to atone, I suppose. Blood money funding the fight against violence. It felt wrong at first, but then I realized what better way to honor the women David killed than to use his family's money to save others. We established the Rebecca Morrison and Sarah Chen Scholarship Fund, providing full college tuition for survivors of domestic violence. 30 women have received scholarships so far. They're studying to be lawyers, doctors, therapists, social workers, teachers. They're turning their trauma into purpose, just like I did. I speak publicly now about my experience. I've given talks at high schools, colleges, churches, corporations, conferences. I've testified before the state legislature in support of stronger domestic violence laws. I've trained police officers on how to handle domestic violence calls. I've taught self-defense classes for women in abusive situations. Every time I speak, someone comes up to me afterward and tells me my story gave them the courage to leave, or that they recognize the warning signs in their own relationship because of what I described, or that they called the hotline and got help. Every single one of those conversations reminds me why I do this work. 5 years have passed since that night in the hospital. 5 years since Michael walked into that examination room and became my lifeline back to the world. 5 years since I wore a wire and recorded David confessing to murder. 5 years since I watched him get handcuffed and dragged away. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still have panic attacks occasionally. I still have days where the trauma feels fresh and raw and overwhelming. PTSD doesn't just go away. It's something I manage, not something I've cured. But I'm happy now. Genuinely, truly happy in a way I never thought I'd be again. I have a husband who loves me without hurting me. I have a son who makes me laugh every day. I have a daughter on the way. I have a brother who never gave up on me. I have parents who support me. I have friends who understand me. I have a purpose that drives me. Last month, I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I visited David in prison. I don't know why I felt compelled to do it. Maybe for closure. Maybe to prove to myself that he had no power over me anymore. Maybe to see him brought low, stripped of his charm and his manipulation tactics, reduced to just another inmate in a jumpsuit. He looked older. Smaller somehow. Prison had aged him, hardened him. When they brought him into the visitation room, he smiled that same smile I remembered, that predatory smile that used to make my blood run cold, but it didn't work anymore. I looked at him and felt nothing, no fear, no anger, no hatred, just nothing. He was nobody to me. Just a pathetic man who'd thrown away his life because he viewed women as objects to profit from. "Why are you here, Sarah?" he asked. His voice still had that smooth quality, but it was hollow now, empty. "I wanted to see you one last time. I said. I wanted to tell you that you failed. You wanted to break me, control me, kill me. But I'm still here. I'm thriving. I have a family, a career, a purpose. I'm helping hundreds of women escape men like you. Your legacy is death. Mine is life. You lost. He leaned forward, tried to intimidate me through the glass. You think you've won? I still live in your head rent-free. You still have nightmares about me. You're still broken because of what I did to you. You'll never be whole again. I smiled, a real smile. You're right that you changed me. The trauma you inflicted on me is something I'll carry forever. But I'm not broken. I'm rebuilt. And I'm stronger now than I ever was before. You're nothing but a cautionary tale I tell to help other women recognize predators like you. That's all you'll ever be. A warning, a lesson, a nobody. I stood up to leave. He called after me. You'll be back. You need me. You'll always need me. But I didn't look back. I walked out of that prison and into the sunshine, and I felt lighter than I had in years. That chapter of my life was closed. He was locked away where he could never hurt anyone again. And I was free, truly, completely free. I tell you all of this not for sympathy, but for hope. If you're in an abusive relationship right now, please know that it's not your fault. You're not weak for staying. You're not stupid for believing the lies. You're not responsible for your abuser's choices. The abuse is not because you're not good enough or you're doing something wrong. It's because your abuser is a broken person who uses violence to feel powerful. You deserve better. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. You deserve partnership, not ownership. You deserve respect, not control. You deserve safety, not fear. Leaving is hard. It's the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship. But resources exist. Hotlines exist. Shelters exist. People who want to help you exist. You don't have to do this alone. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. They're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They can help you create a safety plan, find resources in your area, and support you through every step of leaving. If you can't call, text START to 88788. If you can't text, visit their website. There are ways to get help, even if your abuser monitors your phone or internet use. And if you're not in an abusive relationship yourself, but you suspect someone you love is, please don't look away. Don't ignore the signs. Don't accept the excuses. Ask directly. Offer support without judgment. Believe them when they tell you what's happening. Help them find resources. Be the lifeline they need. I survived because my brother saw the signs and refused to let me disappear. I survived because police officers took me seriously. I survived because people believe me. Someone you know might need you to be their Michael, their Detective Martinez, their lifeline. My scars remind me of where I've been. The cigarette burns on my arms, the place where my wrist was broken and healed wrong, the scars on my scalp where he tore out chunks of my hair. But those scars don't define me. They're just part of my story. They're proof that I survived something terrible and came out the other side. I look at my son playing with his toys, completely innocent and unaware of the darkness his mother emerged from. I look at my husband, who shows me every day what real love looks like. I look at the women in my support groups, fighting their way back to themselves, and I know that everything I went through, as horrible as it was, led me to this moment, led me to a life of purpose and meaning and hope. I'm not grateful for the abuse. I'm not one of those people who says everything happens for a reason, or it made me stronger, like the trauma was some kind of gift. It wasn't. It was hell. It was torture. It nearly destroyed me, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I'm grateful for what I've built from the ashes. I'm grateful for the women I've helped. I'm grateful for the relationships I've repaired and the new ones I've built. I'm grateful for therapy and healing and learning to love myself again. I'm grateful for second chances and new beginnings. If I could go back and prevent it all from happening, would I? In a heartbeat, I'd save Rebecca and Sarah Chen and all of David's other victims. I'd spare myself and my family years of pain, but I can't. That's not how time works. All I can do is move forward with the knowledge I've gained and use it to help others. So that's what I do. Every day, I wake up and choose to turn my pain into purpose. Every day, I share my story so that someone else might recognize their own situation and get out before it's too late. Every day, I work to make sure that fewer women end up where I was, broken, terrified, and convinced they deserved it. David Morrison is rotting in a cell right now. He'll die in that cell. He gets 3 meals a day, a bed, and walls. That's it. That's his entire existence until he dies. Meanwhile, I have a life full of love and joy and purpose and meaning. I have everything he tried to take from me. I won. And if you're in the situation I was in, you can win too. You can survive. You can heal. You can build a beautiful life on the other side of this nightmare. It won't be easy. There will be days where you want to give up, days where the trauma feels like too much to bear, days where you wonder if you'll ever feel normal again. But those days pass. The good days start to outnumber the bad days. The nightmares become less frequent. The panic attacks become manageable. The hypervigilance starts to ease. You learn to trust again, to love again, to laugh again. You learn that you're not defined by what was done to you, but by how you choose to move forward. You learn that you're stronger than you ever imagined possible. Because surviving abuse takes a kind of strength most people will never understand. It takes strength to endure, strength to leave, strength to rebuild, strength to face your trauma in therapy, strength to keep going when everything in you wants to give up. If you've survived abuse, you are a warrior. You fought battles most people can't imagine. You've overcome odds that were stacked against you. You've rebuilt yourself from nothing. That's not weakness. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's incredible, awe-inspiring strength. So thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for supporting survivors, for believing us when we speak up. Every like, every comment, every share helps spread awareness. It helps other women recognize the warning signs. It helps break the silence and shame that keeps so many trapped in abusive relationships. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of survival, strength, and transformation. Comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Tell me your thoughts. Share your own experiences if you feel comfortable. This community is built on supporting each other, and every voice matters. Check out our other videos where survivors share their stories. Every story is different, but the common thread is strength, resilience, and hope. These women are heroes. They face the worst of humanity and come through it. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to be believed. They deserve to be celebrated. And remember, you are stronger than what happened to you. You are more than your trauma. You are a survivor. You are a warrior. You are worthy of love, respect, safety, and happiness. Don't let anyone, especially an abuser, convince you otherwise. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old. My husband beat me every day for 3 years. He tried to murder me, but I survived. I got justice. I rebuilt my life. And now I spend every day making sure other women know they can do the same. You are not alone. You will survive this. And one day, you'll tell your own story of triumph over trauma. I believe in you. We all believe in you. Now you just have to believe in yourself. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay safe, and never forget, you deserve better.